Happy mid cash cows day. We've got all the guys under 455k, which is about a 34 average. And what we're hoping for with these guys is to have about 10 points of value, which would get them to a 44 average and therefore sitting closer to the 600k mark, which would be lovely. Anything, 100k plus is a win in our books, that's for sure, especially when there are going to be guys that you purchase, they get injured, or you buy Nico Hines at $1 million and he drops down to 900k, then you sell him. So there's examples like that last year for sure. So anything where you can get close to that 10 points is what we look for. And with our mid cash cows, there's a heap at this price here, just a little bit over that 400k mark, which the question's going to be, do you select a couple of them? Do you go for one? Do you just avoid in general? There's a few guys here that I think are between that sort of 5 to 10 points. If things go right, is it all going to go right? That's the big question we're going to answer here in this video. So Tallis Duncan kicks us off at 451k. I'm not sure what to make of Tallis last year. It feels like he didn't take the jump that I would have thought after seeing him that year before. He was absolutely terrific, had attacking plays in him, which unfortunately he lost at a lot of the time. Last year, most of that attack went away. The PPM at 0.73 last year was pretty gross. 33.8 was his average in 46.4 minutes. For someone mainly playing in the middle role is pretty gross. There's obviously sometimes he snuck onto an edge there, but coming off the bench, it was mainly through the middle. And what we've seen with PPMs is if we can get it closer to the 0.9, 1, then the minutes is less of a factor. But for Duncan there, 46.4 minutes, you look at that and go, wow, he'd have to be a starter with 50 plus, an edge starter with 60 plus minutes, those kind of numbers for him to be worth it with that PPM. But do we see that PPM improve to what it was more like in less minutes in 2023? Was it just second year syndrome? And we know he has a lot of talent with on his shoulders. Is that going to come back? And again, it's a big question, which we don't like to have too much when we are selecting players, and it's something that's done us dirty in all our previous years, is going for potential rather than looking at some of the risk factors there. So let's go for some of the nice things. If he was to start and play big minutes, if we do happen to see Aitken and Murray out, we don't know at this point, it's still a little bit early, sure, then it could be a good pick if he was to start with them out. But it does feel unlikely, and even then, he hit a 34 in 80 minutes in round 26. Yes, it was against the Panthers, but he had 42 with a try the game before. So for me with Tallis, it is a wait and see if he can make the leap forward. I do find it hard, even if he were to be starting on the left edge for, let's just say he gets a couple of games and Aitken's returning in round 3. There is still worries that you've got guys like Jairo to take that spot. If Murray's out as well, does Colin Matangi start in the 13 role and then move back to an edge, pushing an arrow that might be there, or someone else that's they could push back to that edge. You got Jacob Host and these guys still hunting around. Is that going to be the play with Duncan with some movability risk and put back to the bench risk? And with 46 minutes for 34 points last year, he would have to increase his PPM dramatically with those same minutes, or there's a chance he could get less minutes as well. So Tallis, for me, is not someone I'm super excited about, but in terms of a buy in round 1, but still super bullish on his career as a whole. And I'd love to see him make the leap this year and jump into breakout star kind of level, because he definitely can. And he's young enough, fit enough and strong enough, and has the attack that we've seen that he can do something like that. Griffin Neems, same price, same average last year as Tallis Duncan, the Griff Dog. Man, I really do hope he breaks out this year for my cows. They need him so desperately. Is he going to do it? That's the question. He's getting a little bit older, and he's been there in this league for a while now, and that's something to think about. He's at the 25 mark now, and 24, 25, and hasn't broken out. That's my worry with him. 34 average is not great for someone that is very important to the Cowboys season. You've got Tamalolo out to begin the year, not for too long, but out for long enough. You've got Jordan McLean signing for one more year after his contract expired, and it was a little bit of is he going to sign? Are they going to re-sign him type of thing? Sam McIntyre is the middle forward prop, I should say, that I'm most satisfied or most, I think they can do the best job. You've obviously got Ruben Cotter at 13, but I'm talking about your straight up props because that's where the minutes are available. It's not a 13, it's in the prop position. And Griffin can definitely take that for sure. So let's go through his numbers. I expect he's 0.85 ppm like last year. It's the same as 2022. 2023 was 0.7, which seems a little bit odd. So I'm happy to stick with him, especially for the narrative, to stick with the 0.85 in this scenario because he's done it 2 out of 3 times. And you shouldn't expect him to go worse given he's maturing into becoming a 25-year-old man and has played in this league for a while now. He scored 37.4 points in 41 minutes as starting prop. So that in itself, you look at that with 3.6 points of value, and he scored 31.9 off the bench. For Griffin, I do expect him to start. The question is going to be, can he get between 45 and 50 minutes? And right now, it is all a bit of a guess. And I look at Griffin and go, well, if this upside's there, why didn't he play that last year? Why hasn't he been building to that over the last few years? And that's the question that's getting stuck in my mind with Griffin, as to if he can actually perform at the next level and become a top tier starting prop in this league and for the Cowboys. When he did play over 40 minutes, it was a 39.5 in 46.7 minutes in 11 games. So in that scenario, if he was to continue down that trajectory of playing around that 46.7, which is almost a 6 minute increase for him, then it is almost 6 points of value, which is still not super ideal and is solid, but not groundbreaking for someone in the mid range, which we know that can go wrong. He could get pushed back to bench at certain times if they decide to. They could do a multitude of different things. We're going to speak about Bateman fairly soon, and he could be mixing some middle and edge time, and maybe play. Cotter plays a little bit of prop, and Bateman plays a little bit of 13, and there's a few different things they can do to bolster up that middle, rather than it being an increase from guys like Neem or McIntyre and Harrison Edwards and all these types of Cohen Hess coming back. Like there's a few different things. I don't think Cohen Hess would affect Griffin too much, but Cohen Hess will come back through the middle and will demand some minutes as well. Nothing crazy, but will be another man in that rotation. So when you look at that, 5 points-ish, 6 points of value if he gets a little bit of a bump, but does he actually get that bump in minutes is the big one with Griffin. It's the mid-range price, limited attacking upside for now. Not someone that fills me with a lot of excitement. I know he fills Mark Jessup with a lot of excitement, but Big Griff is not for me right now, although I do see a little bit there. 37 to 40 is kind of where I'm looking at with Griff right now, and it's fine without being spectacular. Speaking of fine without being spectacular, Daniel Saifidi, 448k, 33.6 the average, very, very similar to those boys, but he moves to a different team, a new team in the Dolphins, and he replaces Jesse Bromwich there, which minutes-wise, I think it all should stay fairly similar for Daniel. He's been in this league a long time now, and when you're looking at his minutes, the last 2 years, 46.7 minutes in 2023, 48.3 minutes in 2024 as prop. And that's when he started and wasn't going terribly poor, which he did begin the year that way. So you do have to factor that in a little bit. But let's just say if you looked at those two as 38 and 38.8, which is close to 5 points of value in the first one in 2023, and a tick over 5 points of value in almost 50 minutes. So to me, he feels like about 5 points of value without much upside, keeping the same role. It's fairly simple with Daniel. I do have Griffin over Saifidi, and I do think Duncan has probably the most upside of the three, but might not get the role that we want. With a low PPM, I think there's room for improvement in that one there. Someone I am a little bit more excited about is Davi Moale. Spoke about him a few times already in the preseason, just as a guy that I think will increase on his average definitely and be a bit more of a breakout guy. But 432k, 32.4 the average, that little bit less, which is helpful. An extra 1.5 points that he can increase, which is helpful. But is it time for him? He's going to turn 22 in March, and he's already into his fourth. He's going to be into his fourth season after playing sort of 1 or 2 in that first year. He had a 0.78 ppm in 2023, 0.88 last year in 24, and the minutes jumped from 27 to 36.7 as well. And you look there, as once he started in round 9, he did score 37.7 in 42.6 minutes. And the ppm's not terrible at all, sitting basically at that 0.88 as well as a starter compared to on the bench. It was all very similar. It does feel like Griffin Neame with that 5 points of value. That's 5.3 there in 42.6 minutes, but he's younger. Neame has had his chance the last 2 years, I think, which is probably what Davi's got the next 2 to get to that same age as Griff, that 24-ish range leading into that 25 season. And personally, I do see 5 points of value with the minutes and then PPM upside. And the question's going to be, is it worth the mid-range risk on someone like Davi? When you look at their side, you've got Tevita Totola coming back from injury, which is why Davi did start. But I do think with Totola, it's a pretty bad one. Like, he hasn't been running for a long time, and he's on that, I keep going to say the hyperbaric chamber, but that treadmill where they get him in the vortex, we'll call it. And he hasn't been running for a long time. He's back in that now. You have no Burgesses anymore. Who's going to step up as their prop? They do have the edges now with Aitken coming over. They've got guys like Jairo that could be a big minute prop, but a lot of their players are older and they don't have anyone else outside of Davi Mwale as their young buck who's actually improving. And it was great to see the minutes jump last year. And if there's a world where he can get 45 minutes consistently, then probably do expect a little bit of improvement as well. But at that same PPM, he'd be closer to the 40 mark, which is at 7.5 points of value, which is a lot more enticing to me. So I do have him above the other guys on this list, just because I think he's got that extra couple of years of growth, which Neame didn't take, and I think Davi can. I do expect him to be the starter or one of the starters there. Who it's going to be with is going to be the question. If we do have injuries to Aitken and Murray to begin the season, then his stocks do rise a little bit more because we will see Totola a little bit later as well. If the boys are back, then we may see, we're very likely to see Arrow in the front row and commanding some decent minutes. And it could sit around that 40 mark, which would mean just a tiny bit of value. But for me, with Moale, there's very limited downside because minutes should be somewhere around that 40 mark. If they're 37, 38, then you'll still jump. You'll still sit at that average, which is not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the best. And if it does bump that little bit, he'll have, that little bit of upside. Any further than that, any improvement in his play as he gets a little bit older, then, for someone that's had a lot of reps on him, he came in really early, obviously. He played his first game at like 18, fresh 18. So that's something to think about with him there. And there's a chance to improve, but is it going to be worth that mid-range risk? All right, there's plenty of interesting fellas in this list with Nafahu White and Kobe Hetherington, the two men up next. For Nafahu White, he had a 0.85 ppm in 2023 and a 0.94 in last year in 2024 in 33 minutes, which wasn't crazy, obviously, but still decent when you're looking at that compared to Davi. Just a tick under 4 minutes less, and the ppm was high. And he has the edge duel as well, which is what's getting everyone excited for sure. To me, he seems very consistent. If you're looking at scores last year, he'd have massive games followed by a 22 in 39 minutes. And we even saw that for New Zealand as well. He started 13 for them, which is massive. When you're looking at that as a reason to potentially have someone in your squad, you won't look at Phoenix Crossland playing 9, NZ as the example, given they're just really short of 9s. That's all we can say about that front. But in other positions, they're a lot more stacked and they're a very, very good team. So for him to get that spot at 13 and play good minutes is a testament to him and his skills and his ability to play. And he's improving every single game, in my opinion. And we saw that with New Zealand. He had 62 in 44 minutes in one game, which was basically all base. And then he had 32 and 44 in the next. So the consistency around Nafahu White, it's not tremendously high, but he's also young and he's finally getting his opportunity. And let's just look at it regardless of Radley potentially moving to lock. We have a few guys moving on. May and I was going to say Fisher Harris, Warrior Hargraves, all the acronyms. Those two guys are gone, and that's massive for him. And if you just look at that in isolation alone, and you lose to Tilly as well, right? You lose those three, and there should be more minutes available for a guy that is improving. He's a year older now. He's played for New Zealand now. He's ticking all the boxes. Expect bigger minutes, right? Last year, basically I've written I would expect over 30 minutes regularly in start or bench. He had 37.3 was the average in 40.7 minutes last year, which that alone gives you 6.2 points of value. Should we expect him to get 40 minutes? I think so, whether it's on the bench or in the starting side. If he was to start, then he could get it to 45 or 50 minutes, which would put him in the 40s and be awesome at that PPM with some natural improvement. And when we say natural improvement, probably 5 to 10% is easily expected for a guy making those strides for sure. So I do think it's a similar situation to Neem and Moale, but his team has lost those two important middles and Satili as well, and hasn't really recruited outside of Nwanga Itawaze out in the the centers and the wing. So Nafahu, a lot of people are cooling on, and I do understand that. With Radley likely pushing into that 13 role again, do we see Nat Butcher on that edge? We've got Egan coming back from some regular injuries as well. You've got Crichton on one edge. If that's the play, and Nafahu's not the 13, and that's why a lot of people are excited about him, because he played 13 for New Zealand with some guys moving. You expect him to start in that role, or there is obviously potential for him to start in the prop role as well. And if that's the case, you would, definitely should be expecting 40 minutes. They do a Spencer Lenu on the bench as well. Does he stick with that role that he excels at off the bench? He's done it for New South Wales as well. He's done it for winning Panthers teams, and he did last year for the Roosters. Does that continue? And if Nafahu gets that start, then he could be potentially better than all of these guys with the dual position as well. I have Moale up high on my rankings. I also have Nafahu White still high on those rankings, and we'll see if it changes anyone's minds with Nafahu White after watching this video or listening to this podcast. Thanks for doing that, both for everyone. Appreciate that a lot. And also jump in and do follow the podcast there if you're so kind to do so. Come back to that regularly. It's going to be out before the YouTube videos all the way through until the start of the season, which will be good. And please do subscribe on YouTube. Those numbers are increasing dramatically, so thank you very much to that. With those subscription numbers, just going to keep us all that one big family. And if you are interested in the private group, I'll talk about that more at the end, but all the info is in the description, guys. Competitions, help from me, help from other legends out there, and just that big community, which is awesome. If you want to take your game, your fantasy game and your Supercoach game to the next level. All right, let's move to Kobe Hetherington now. 414K for him. It was a 0.76 ppm last year, and in general is the worry. And there's lots of talk about him as starting at 13, and Carrigan's just come out and spoken about it as well. And we'll have to mention Corey Pakes while we're here. Corey Pakes apparently the starting hooker, they reckon. So we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into him, but he'll be very, very cheap, and we know he has a pretty poor ppm from my thoughts. And one of the guys popped up a couple of stats about him, Corey Pakes, in Supercoach, and they were gross. It was like when he got over 40 minutes, he averaged like 35. Yay. Like it was something silly. It was gross. When he got over 60 minutes, he averaged 43. Yay. It was not ideal. PPM was pretty poor, and it's not ideal, super ideal for fantasy either, but we'll get to him in another one once I've got it all set up. I forgot to set it up for this one. All right. Yeah, Hetherington. So last year, 33 in 46 minutes at lock was his average. So pretty gross on that front. If he gets 50 minutes, it is 4 points of value on that PPM. 50 minutes for 4 points of value. That is disgusting, to be honest with you. Very, very gross. But you'd need 55 to 60 in that scenario. And how does he get that? With Haas, Carrigan, Jensen, Willison improving. It's a much different situation to the guys above. To the three players above. Good typing. The situation that they have is they're likely to be the most important forward in their team. Saifidi's going to be fairly important in his side as well, unless Gilbert's playing prop. All those guys there, they're going to have that, but Kobe isn't, and that's why he just sits around this value for years and years and years. He started at times, as I said, 33 and 46 minutes a lock. He just can't pop the points together, and it's funny that old time when I got all hot and heavy for Kobe Hetherington, I've completely cooled off him from then, and it's worked every single time, to not even bother thinking about him, because his PPM in that first few games where we saw was awesome, and then he just never got the minutes. And his PPM since that time where I was spouting him as like a 1 PPM guy, if he just got the minutes, he'd be a 50-point player, blah, 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 blah. Since that point, his PPM has gone down the toilet, and it's staying that way. If it miraculously changes this year and you guys select him, happy days for you. Too good. I'll wear that one, but it would be all luck that his PPM would change with how it's looked over the last bunch of years now. So Kobe Hetherington, not on my radar, that's for sure, but it's a fun one to muck around with, because he's going to get more minutes. Yay. But Hetherington and Corey Pakes, go have a look at those guys, and probably poo-poos the chat around Blake Moser, unfortunately. A few guys to go. Jazz Tavanga, 412k. For him, he does move over to Manly, and with PPMs between 0.92 and 0.95 over the last 3 years, that's good viewing. It means you will need a minimum of 40 minutes, though, to be of relevance. In that scenario, 40 minutes would be in that high 30s and give him about 7 to 8 points of value, which would be pretty nice. And we have seen him be a 40-point scorer for years. Last year was the year that he had the lowest minutes in a while. He's been a 40, 42, 43, 44 type guy for the Wars. And look, I think it's definitely a chance in this Manly side. They are pretty short on forwards as well. We saw last year they signed Lodge for to get him in, and then he obviously did his ACL. I think that was 2 years ago now, crazily enough. But they don't have a tremendous amount of big guys in that situation. They've got Olakwatu as a big dog on the edge. They've got Jake Trbojevic in the 13 role, and it's a collection of guys like Paseka and Sipley and these types of players there. And that's where Tavanga, I think, can come in and most likely be off the bench, but can be a 40-minute guy. And in that scenario of his PPM, last year he just played the 33 minutes, which was rough. But if he can get back to that, I think he can, then it'll be sweet. They don't need the lock minutes in Manly. It's just a prop split, but is he going to split 40-40 with someone? That's the big question. I think people will take him, and they're probably not going to be dissatisfied with him. It's just difficult to determine if he were to get more than 40 minutes, which would put him into a great buy territory. 38, 39, 40 minutes, it's still fine, but you want 41, 42, 43. If he can get that, and I think he will in certain games, and if you happen to lose Jake Trbojevic at one time or another, or if he gets injured, which he hardly does, which is great, then he could be a really good pick. Right now, it's an interesting pick, and I just think we want to see what trials gives us with someone like Jazz Tavanga. While there were actually, the people have mentioned him to have a look at, and great call by you guys to do that, because there's definitely something here with Jazz, and he's one you want to have a look at over the next period of time and see what happens with trials over the next few weeks. It's going to be good, fun. It's great seeing players go to new teams and become a little bit more interesting than what they were at their previous team. And just a quick one on Jazz, for those that don't know, he would be a guy that could split some time at hooker. He would play some 13, but if he ever got the start at 13 and he could get into the 50 minutes, that's where the PPM becomes incredible. And that's what I'm saying about the PPM guys. If you can get near that 0.9 mark or even above it, closer to the 1, as soon as you get some allotment of decent minutes, you become instantly relevant. And that's what happens with guys like with Starling. He gets the minutes. He's incredibly relevant because he's in the 0.7s as a hooker. If you're in the 0.9s as a middle, you just need the 40 minutes or so, and you become super relevant compared to if you're getting 30 off the bench, you go to 45, bang, close to 10 points of value right there. And guys like Tavanga can do that. Sam Hughes, 389k. You'd expect some natural improvement from him, right? Because there were times where he'd just get the one stint and they're like, oh, we're just preserving him because he's a new player in this league, blah, 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 blah. Thank you, Gus. 29, he averaged in 33 minutes last year. So if he was to continue starting, there would be room to grow, you'd imagine, just in minutes, because it didn't actually improve his average starting and playing more minutes. Surprisingly enough, he had some good games off the bench. The problem here is the addition of guys like Tomamone and Satili Tupanua. My thoughts is he probably sticks with that sort of 35 to 40 minutes and it doesn't actually improve his average enough. There are too many variables for Hughes, in my opinion, because if he got to 40 minutes and yeah, cool, that could be like a 35 average. But if he stayed at 35 minutes, then he'd probably a 30, 31, 32, and it's not too exciting. So 389, I think you could go up a little bit higher and get someone of better value. Emre Gula, 380k for him, 28.5. So he does move to the Dragons, which basically he goes from a team that is stacked with middle forwards to another team that is stacked with middle forwards, in my opinion. You know, he is best PPM in 3 years at 0.8. So if you're looking at that compared to someone like Tavanga, you need more out of the minutes. You know, you need more minutes out of Gula than you do with Jazz Tavanga. And that can be a worry. My question is, why are people making a fuss over him? He would need basically 45 minutes to be anything at this PPM, right? Because 45 minutes or so gets you closer to the high 30s, the mid to high 30s there. 36, 37 type of range there in there. And that gives you that 8 points of value there. But how's he going to get 45 minutes in a pack full of 6+ options? There are so many guys, you know, looking at, I was just analysing Eisenhuth in the Edge video. But he went from like 80 minutes to 45 minutes to 33 minutes to 55 minutes. And is that going to happen for someone like Gula where he can get that consistency? That's going to be hard. Yeah, you've got the Couchman brothers coming through. You've got Blake Laurie potentially on the way out, but the edges are pretty well covered. What's going to happen with, you know, Faital and Mariner? There's all these guys that they need to look at and fit into this side, and that's where the big minutes, I think, is going to be fairly difficult on that front for Gula. I think there's a good chance he gets close to the 40 mark, but the PPM needs to be higher, and 40 minutes is not enough, unfortunately. In that scenario, he'd be a 32 guy in 40 minutes, which is 3.5 points of value. And that's all I can expect confidently. Anything more than that would just be wow. Like, he wasn't getting anywhere near that at the Raiders, and there's a reason why he's 28.5 is his average, because he only got 30 odd minutes. So keep that in your thoughts for Gula. Not someone I'm super excited about, and unless we hear otherwise in terms of minutes, then shouldn't be for you as well, in my opinion. Royce Hunt, Royce the Choice, 275k. That's a pretty nice price, isn't it? And it's funny that the time that he could be an option is the time that he is the cheapest. 275k, averaged 19.4 last year, and that's because his minutes were pretty gross. The junk PPM of 0.8 last year as well. So there's a mixture of the PPM and a slight drop in the minutes for him. Because he's been a 1 PPM points per minute, guys, over all the rest of his career, basically. So 24.8 in 25.6 is basically 1 PPM, which includes last year's 0.8. 29.6 in 31.7 minutes as a starter. And you look at that is 10.2 points of value on what he is currently priced at. So if he does start, you probably just have to pick him. With 30 minutes and a new team without a hell of a lot of middles, the likely floor, basically, in my opinion, with a bit of oomph to him. You know, he's got that. He's got that bit of mongrel, which is always good to watch. And if he can actually spend some time on the park, then that would be great. But at this point, you're probably not looking to start him. You'd only be maybe in a round 13 scenario if he was still holding, round 12, I should say. If you're still holding him at that point, that you might start him, or it's just a looping situation. You know, he's a guy that can score tries. It didn't really happen last year, but he can. And if he were to score a try in a game and get 33 minutes, then you're looking at maybe a 50, which is awesome for someone like Hunt and is a looping candidate. So if we see him anywhere near the starting spot in round 1, then I think you just slot him into your team and hope for about 10 points of value and get in and out, get one of those cheapies in your team and go home laughing. It's just, he's just never played it. But like, why we're skipping over him really quick is the fact that surely he gets 30 minutes at Tigers. It's got to be a 90% chance. If that's the case, you just get him in your side. If he doesn't, which he hasn't for a long time, then sweet. But that's been at the Sharks when they're very stacked. Whittemore Greg. Had to slot him in there. I think, it was very, very much an off year in 2024 for Greg after being really, really good in the time on the park in 2023. And the reason we have to look at him is it's near a 1 ppm. He had 32 average in 34.5 minutes in 2023. And this gives me a fair bit of interest for sure. So with Greg, there's plenty to do this offseason to get near that, 32 and 34 minutes. But if he gets it, that's 15 points of value, which is good fun. That's what we're looking for. And then Tom Amone, 250k. This is an interesting one, and we've got a bit on him here, which is good. But a career 16.9 average in 21.6 minutes across 3 seasons, and it was 20 games. So that doesn't fill me with too much love and support, that's for sure. He's coming to the Dogs who, they've added Satilli as well. They have got, guys like Curran building into his role. You got King there. You've got Hughes improving. Hayward, Kurt Mann was awesome for the Dogs last year. It does make it hard for him to come in and play any more minutes. And from all accounts, he has improved dramatically. And he's been one of the better forwards in the Super League, which, is easier to do than here, but he was younger when he first went over. People are super excited about how well he did over there for sure. And deservedly so. Looking at these stats, 135 meters and 32 tackles per game in the big minutes is super impressive. So they look at that and they go, oh, well, he's played big minutes over there. He'll come back and play big minutes for the Dogs. I don't see it that way. If he gets named on the bench in their trial, I would expect him to be bench in round 1, and therefore would be a very hard selection to see him get more than 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, whatever it is, at a PPM that might not be 1. We don't know at this point how it's going to be in the NRL again. He's an easy guy at 250k. You can just watch and see. Adrian Lamb says it was crazy improvement coming over as a bench guy, which is exactly what he was, into turning into one of the better stars in their game, better middles in their game. So the trials will be telling. Obviously excited if he gets a spot and gets some decent minutes, if he starts or whatever. You could have Curran and Hughes off the bench. That could happen, but I'm not counting on it. And we also saw last year they played guys like Farmasili, small minutes in a starting role. He'd get 20 minutes and then he'd be out and not play the rest of the game, or 15 minutes and be out. Like there's chance for that to happen with certain guys. They got Jamin Salmon that they'll want to slot into that role, into that middles role as well. So it's very, very difficult to fit all these guys in. But he does bring a different body to the team, similar to that with Satilli, that I think will be helpful for the side over the year, but will it be helpful from round 1? That is the mid cash cow video. I think that was a lot of fun. It went for a while actually, and a lot of analysis to go through. I wanted to get through all of those guys in the same spot, so it made sense to extend the cash cow length all the way up to a 34 average, but they can all do it in certain games and in certain times, but is it going to happen regularly? It's going to be the question. And guys, if you are looking for my mid best rankings across the whole section, my cheapie rankings, mid value, the top guns, but put them all together in priority of buyers, then that's going to be in the private group along with all the other good stuff that I did mention earlier. So jump in the description. It's all in there along with the JBFA overall league code. So jump in and check that out. And I really appreciate all of you guys for supporting the show by watching and listening on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. You're all legends. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you in the next one.